this is Idea Coaches for Coach Strong. Sorry for not having any videos up for you. It's two reasons. One, I'm on vacation, and the second, I found both the Few and the Fox 2 cards to be extremely academic. All the main card fights, the favorites won. There's no point doing a preview, so let's get into this right now. We're on the weight classes episode 16A, the preview to UFC 143, which is headlined by the Welter Weight Interim Championship match, having Carlos Condit face off against Nick Diaz. Let's get into it. Welter Weight bout, Josh Koscheck versus Mike Pierce. And perhaps one of the last welterweight fights Josh Koscheck will participate in, he faces Mike Pierce at UFC 143. Josh, just like his AKA brethren John Finch, has been in career limbo ever since his second loss to George St. Pierre that was sandwiched between a super safe and boring fight with Paul Simtex Daly and, at the time of this video, the retirement match of Matt Hughes. The straight right hand of Koscheck, blended with his amazing wrestling ability and from time to time dirty tactics, make him a difficult fight for anyone regardless of their opponent's skill sets. There's no clear stylistic bad matchup for him. The man that he is matched up against, Mike Pierce, is a fighter that has been poorly booked ever since his third-round rally against John Finch. After that loss, Pierce went on to face three fighters that were all making their UFC debuts until he took a split decision loss against Johnny Hendricks. I can't see a way for Pierce to win this one, but at the same time, I think he has the ability to make this a competitive fight as long as Josh decides to keep this one standing. Heavyweight bout, Fabricio Werdum versus Roy Nelson. And the sole heavyweight bout on this card, Fabricio Werdum, the first man to defeat and by extension inadvertently kill the Fedor hype, will face off against the big little heavyweight that could in Roy Nelson. Let's make this quick. Nelson's ground game at one point was underrated due to his physique, but then everyone said that it was underrated and started overrating it. He has not won a fight by submission in nearly 6 years. He holds off some of his lower tier opponents from taking him down because of his grappling, but the bulk of his wins come from those powerful haymakers. Werdum is back in the UFC after being released on the weakest conditions. Probably the best heavyweight fighter that is the least respected for whatever reason. His past two losses came from the #1 contender in Overeem and the present UFC champion Junior Dos Santos at the time of this video. He is not a power striker, and he does not have the best takedowns in the game. What he does have is intellect and tenacity, and those are great attributes for any fighter. While Big Country is not the slouch that he appears to be, it seems that only precision strikers have Werdum's number. Just throwing the overhand won't cut the mustard. It's Werdum's fight to lose, and I see him picking up the win sometime after the middle of the second frame. Interim Welterweight Championship bout, Carlos Condit versus Nick Diaz. So after a wild turn of events, the original and substitute challengers for the George St. Pierre's welterweight belt, originally scheduled back in UFC 137, will face off against one another for the interim belt. Both contenders are the last welterweight champions of their respective organizations, Condit being the last WC welterweight champ, and Diaz being the last Strikeforce one. Diaz completely changed people's perspective about him in the BJ Penn fight. The entire mood about this guy shifted in those 15 minutes of fighting and whatever time was left in the post-fight interview. While clear holes in his game stand out like a sore thumb, that being kicks and kick defense, takedown and takedown defense, Nick has been able to compensate that with his unique style of boxing and superb jiu-jitsu game. There's an X factor about him though. He's able to make opponents play his games. Most of the fights that he has follow the formula of being a striking match at first, which Nick's opponents usually get the shorter end of the stick and are forced to take him down to avoid more punches to the face, and ends up more oftentimes than not a submission win for Nick Diaz. Yeah, there was a time where he lost 3 consecutive UFC fights based on points, but that was a different era and a different Nick Diaz. His opponent, while not being excellent in any one facet, has quite a nice overall game, and that's fitting to seeing how he looks like John Everyman. Carlos is able to dictate the pace and location of the fight because he is deceptively strong. He's no one-hitter quitter, but after a couple of punches, most of his opponents step back. Even though he has a number of submission victories, he has had trouble in the past with guys who have a comprehensive ground game. Losses to Catman, Shields, and Kitayoko when he was a welterweight come to mind. The problem is that a guy like Diaz fits very nicely with the fighters I just mentioned. There's a lot at stake here. For Nick Diaz, if he loses, he's back to being labeled as a no-class pothead that doesn't deserve to be on the big stage of MMA. For Carlos Condit, perhaps a permanent marking as a gatekeeper due to the fact that he has yet to beat a higher-level fighter. I don't think that Condit is intimidated by Nick. However, the qualities that Condit is better than Diaz does not outweigh the qualities that Nick is better than Condit. This is not a simple striker versus grappler setup. I actually see Carlos taking one of the first 2 rounds, perhaps both, and then Nick winning later in the fight. Okay, so this is my rundown of my picks: Josh Koscheck, Mauricio Verdun, and Nick Diaz. The undercard looks a little weak this time. I'm not too excited for it. There's a lot of Ultimate Fighter alumni and a number of fighters I've never seen fight before. Other than that, I'll see you guys about 3 or 4 days after the event because I'll be flying back